Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Decentralized Ventures podcast. Today I have a really awesome story. I have with me Christian Landgren and he will be talking about Open School Platform. I heard about it on Hacker News and I thought, hey, I got to have Christian come to the podcast and tell himself about the story. I think it's really fascinating and yeah, I'm sure you will enjoy. So, Christian, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Vale.
Yeah, so could you maybe tell a little bit about yourself and then obviously about this amazing, interesting project?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Christian, and I'm a programmer, like a school, a very typical nerd from sitting in my home from 8. I think it was when I first got hold of my first computer, and just trying to understand it and also thinking a lot about how this will affect the society and my life. And so I've been working with that for my whole life. And I started my first company when I was 17, and I've been entrepreneurs ever since. And are helping kind of both companies and organizations and also governments and politicians to think about and talk about how tech can improve our lives. Actually, that's my main focus. There's a lot of ideas about the future that are really terrible, and I think that we do have control over the tech, so we can choose what future we want. So I want to be part of kind of creating a future that is sustainable and good for us as human beings.
Yeah. Are you located in Stockholm, right? Sweden,
Yeah,
Stockholm?
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And you work in an IT company, right?
yeah,
Like by day, you work with projects, clients, and so forth, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
this, if I pronounce it correctly, Öppna Skolplattformen or
Yeah, that's
something to
good.
that
Yeah,
extent. Yeah, I
absolutely.
did study Swedish for a few
Yeah.
years. So yeah, I know maybe a
Good
few
job.
words here and there.
Yeah.
So obviously, this project is not part of your, your regular day-to-day work, right? It's
No,
it's
exactly.
it's yeah,
Yeah.
it's your kind of like hobby that has
Mm.
transformed into something a lot more important for you. So maybe you could, yeah, tell us about the project. You
Sure.
have this awesome cap,
Yeah.
and you told me before we got started that it all started with this cap. So
Yeah, exactly. This is how it started. Or maybe you should give a little bit of background
yeah,
about
please
the
do.
school project, the school platform provided by the city in the first place. So that was a project. I think it was started 2012. And they did a kind of 2 year, I think it was 2 years of pre-study about what the schools want and what the parents want and the children want and the teacher want in kind of tech and digitalization. And then after 2 years, they did the big mistake of starting this huge project where they tried to solve all of those things that they understood was problems and opportunities for the school. And this project then was procured, and I think it was $60 million or something like that,
Wow.
or 60 million euros. And they thought that was a reasonable price. I don't know why, but they started, and then 8 years after that they released it, and obviously it was crap. So nothing worked, and the parents hated it, the teachers hated it, the kids hated it, and and it still had costed a lot of not at that time it costed a lot more than the budget was from the beginning. And now I think it's up at 125 million euros and
Whoa.
still counting. And it's a lot of licenses, a lot of support, and a lot of like a lot of security issues. So you could say that this is a typical government failure. Like no one wants to touch it, and but they still have it, and someone needs to kind of maintain it. So I realized that this is affecting my life in significant ways because I have 3 kids, and I'm separated from their mother, so we have a lot of communication that we need to make sure that we understand what's going on in school. So the principal in my kids' school, they are he is he think that this is something that needs to be used in order for it to kind of be valuable in the first place. So he is forcing my kids' teachers to only communicate through this platform. So it's a little bit of hassle. So after a lot of frustration, 2 years of frustration from me, I decided to be more vocal about my opinion about this because obviously a lot of people are grunting about this in private sessions and things like that, and on dinners and stuff. And it's the typical joke, like in my field, like we don't want to be like the school platform. Um, anyway, because I didn't think that this was good use of both our money, of course, but also of our time. We shouldn't use a platform that was built just because it was expensive, because it's not working. It's just taking a lot of time from everyone. So I decided that it's probably better to not use this, even if we have spent all this money on it, especially for the use that I was using it for, like communicating what's going on with the classes. It's better to use email for that. So then I bought this cap. It says Skrota Skolplattformen, which means like put it in the trash. So that was the start of it, and I put this picture up on Twitter, and I used it when I was getting my kids from school, and then I realized that the teachers, of course, they hated this as much as I was doing, so they just silently, because they couldn't from the principal, but say that it was but they was like silently, I like your cap.
Wow.
And then I realized that this is actually much bigger than just me, and of course, this is a conversation that needs to be brought up into kind of a larger perspective. And then since I'm a programmer myself, I decided to just look at the kind of the background to see how hard could it be to kind of do something that is better just on top of what it's actually are presenting. And then I realized a lot of the problems that the school platform has are in the front end. So and then there are obvious problems also in the back end, but those can be manageable. So what I first started doing was kind of just for myself, trying to create an app that showed this information from the back end, but in a different front end, and just running it on my own hardware and my phone, and then I realized this is actually going to be quite good. This is actually going to be an app that I want to use. So I put it up like a screen share, the app, how it looked from me. And also I decided to publish the code on open source on GitHub, so anyone else that wanted to join could do. And pretty soon there were a lot of people joining. So and former colleagues of mine, and also parents and other interested people that were interested in this to see what was possible. So I think it was 5 weeks after that we declared the app as being finished. Like now we actually have something we can use for ourselves, and if anyone else wanted to download that, they could download the code and run it for themselves. And then we started to kind of look at the options of actually releasing this as an app. And we made a lot of really cautious decisions while doing that. So we realized that this is obviously going to be something that both media and also of course the city will not look at with the happy eyes. They obviously should, because if they have the interest of the people, and we can come up with a better solution to this, then of course they should look at this and be happy with that they get an alternative. But since they have spent so much money, it's embarrassing to kind of get something that some teacher or some parents have created in 5 weeks. So we realized that this, of course, going to be something that people are going to look at, and we made a lot of conscious decisions there. And one of them was to only store data in the device by itself. Like we were restricting the app from sending information to anywhere else rather than just the back end of the school platform. When we have done that, and we had a lot of discussions with security experts of this, and also legal experts to start thinking about like the implications of this, and then we released it, and also talked to the media. And before even the app was released, the city was really angry, and they in the TV and news the local news here, they were they weren't happy at all, and they started saying like this is probably illegal and we should look into this, and we should probably stop it and things like that. So and they did. Directly after we have launched it, they did also launch their own investigations internally for looking at this. And once we got details about that investigation, we realized that they hadn't like looked at the ways of opportunities in the legal framework to actually allowing this. They were definitely looking at like how can we stop this? What are the legal tools we have to stop this? So they were looking at like copyright infringement, like they were looking at like security and I don't know, data intrång, things like that. Like so they were actively seeking legal tools to stop this. And we met with them, and in the meetings they were fine, and we had good conversations. And in the first meeting, we suggested to them that the problems you have from a legal standpoint, those are mainly on your side. You do have kind of you have something here that you have to somehow consider. Like you have a backend that is sending information to a third party, like an app in this case. But from our point of view, or from the user's point of view, it's not a difference between this from a legal standpoint than from using Chrome or Safari or something else. So they are in a kind of in a little bit of a weird situation where they have their responsibilities for the actual data and the privacy of the users, and still they kind of since we're not storing any data, they can't really blaming us for doing something because we are just providing a tool. So that put them into a situation where we also let them off the hook with a very easy suggestion, which was that we could sign an agreement where they could tell us what to do. Like you are only allowed to do this and that with this data, and you can't really store it anywhere else and things like that. And but they didn't want to collaborate on that at all. They just wanted to finish their investigation, and then after 2 months, I think it was last Wednesday, I think it was. They concluded their investigations, and they also filed a police report
Wow.
and about us. So that was a little bit disappointing, if you could say that. And obviously, also at the same time, we have been, or in the meantime, during their investigations, they also, and this was the things that were also published on Hacker News and a lot of discussions in the international community. That during the time when they did this investigations, they also tried to stop us by changing parameters in the API, like really ridiculous ones. Like they were changing headers and things, and just to make sure that our app was not working properly. So they were sabotaging the app, and they had the technical option to do that. And since we had promised ourselves not to do any dynamic code at all in the app, that was one of the conscious decisions that forced us to do a new release every time they changed something. And before this, I think they had done like 1 or 2 releases a year. But during those time, I think there was 7 releases during 2 weeks. And for each release they did, we just changed our code and released a new one. So just a few hours after they have done all these hacks that they were doing, we just released a new one. So now I think they have stopped doing that, and they are now trying to do this really ridiculous claim that we should do something illegal by using the data that we already have access to as parents, and showing them in an app that aren't sending or sending or storing any data anywhere else. So yeah, that's pretty much where we are right now.
Wow, that's a lot of info. I made some notes, but basically, if you maybe specific question. So when they started to build this huge system, right, that basically just pure shit, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
went over budget. Deadlines were passed, and nothing really worked, and it barely
Mm.
works. And now they are forcing it down the throat of the teachers and
Yeah.
parents and so forth. But it wasn't open source, right, from the start. So it's a
No, of
closed
course not.
system
Yeah.
that basically means that they will now only be able to work with that one company that was
Right.
in
Yeah.
charge of creating it. So
Yeah.
that's why it went way over budget, right? Because if it was open source, they could stop and say, hey,
Yeah.
peace off, we're gonna get some better guys to continue doing this. So maybe they
Yeah.
could have come to you, right, and say like,
Sure.
hey, could you
Yeah.
do this? But yeah, but it wasn't open source, so they were tied to this horrible system.
Mm.
And you mentioned, from the technical perspective, basically you reversed engineered it by just looking at the API and
Mm.
understanding that, hey, there is a backend API,
Yeah.
and you basically are using the same API that their official application is using, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But obviously, they didn't provide any documentation. They didn't provide anything,
We no
nor
no.
there is any way for you to know what actually happens. You just have to push and try, kind of trial and error
No,
method.
actually, we have also been very cautious about that too. Like we know that they're gonna be like looking at this, like and try to pin us with like we have done something that you can't do.
Hmm.
We are only showing data that we can get access to ourselves, only with the kind of the URLs that we actually see in the Chrome developer tools, and that's something that everyone can just press one button and in their web browser and see exactly those things. Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, we before starting, I asked them a very polite question like, can we
Hmm.
get access to the documentation? Since this is open procurement, and that's what's one of the demands in the procurement, that the vendors should develop an API and then also an SDK. And an
Hmm.
SDK means software development kit. So
Hmm.
that means that they are somehow preparing for other developers to also start using the software, the backend that they have purchased. Uh, and we got the response back that no, you can't look at that because that's secret. Yeah. That would reveal a lot of security implications, which itself is very pretty much means that they're relying on security by obscurity in order
Yeah,
for
that doesn't work.
no, it doesn't work. So and also that has been obvious for everyone that this is not a secure system, and the only the only the only thing that this actually provides in comparison to email is that it should be secure communication. That's like kind of the best thing about this platform, that
Yeah.
it's a secure way for you to communicate. But a lot of like I think it was 5 or 6 major security breaches in this in this platform from the start, and it's probably a lot more than that we haven't found yet. Yeah.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, I did a little bit of translating
Yeah.
of your website and obviously read Hacker News and so forth. But you did actually report some security issues, right, to
Yeah.
them?
Yeah.
Am I correct, right? You
Yes.
were nice about it. You didn't exploit it, obviously, in any way. You
No.
noticed it and you
Mm.
quietly reported it, no?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's so I think it was the first or the second day when I started looking at their
Mm-hmm.
API calls, I realized that they have very significant security weakness in the way
Mm-hmm.
that they have done this. And so I reported this, and I talked to kind of security experts about how severe this problem
Mm-hmm.
was. And but then I got the reply back like, this is something we know about, but it would be too expensive to fix it. So we are just relying on the fact that we know that no one is using it, which is such a weird thing to do. Like, you
Yeah.
have paid all this money to get a secure system for communication, but it's not secure enough, and it's too expensive to fix the actual security problems. Um, So, and this was in December, and still they haven't fixed that problem. So this is still a security weakness in this platform, which is weird. It's so bizarre. The whole thing is so bizarre. Like, I don't understand how anyone can keep their jobs by still maintaining and also trying to force people that wants to help out of the conversation.
Yeah, I don't understand it. I mean, because there is obviously information about children, right? So
Yeah,
basically, any security breach could potentially mean there could be some, maybe personal information could be leaked, right? Maybe
yeah.
information about children and so forth. It's very severe, so to say.
Yeah, and their internal documents also say that this is a permanent problem, and it's a really really serious problem.
Okay.
So they have discussed this internally. They know about the problem, but they can't really do something about it. So they are in a tight spot, and I don't envy them for having that. But they can't really they can't really blame the ones finding it
Of course.
about that.
Yeah, and obviously, were they happy about this disclosure? Did they say like, "Yeah, thank you very much for reporting. We are aware of it. We are looking into it," or did they call police on you again?
No, they didn't call the police, but I still haven't received any communication back from them about this. Like, yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't expect them to do that either. But they don't have any, which is also astonishing, since they have already gotten a lot of reports. They should have, at this time, they should understand that it's important to have kind of disclosure procedure. So it's safe for someone to
Hmm.
disclose problems with their platform, and also have ways of communicating and also kind of understanding and reporting back when they have fixed problems. And this is just one of three big security problems I've found during the time when I've looked, or we have looked at this.
Hmm.
And all of those three major problems we have tried to disclose, or not disclose, but to let them know in a as professional way as possible.
Hmm.
So that's also astonishing to me. Like, how can government agencies put that much money and not have proper ways of handling security reports?
I'm
And
just
this
wondering.
is
Yeah.
also, you could say, this is not only related to school platform, because this is the government, the city of Stockholm, the kind of all the digital services they have are vulnerable to this. So that where you have a lot of sensitive, not only to kids, but you have social, when you go to kind of have counsel with a social I don't know what's it called, a therapist
Therapist
or
maybe
something.
or
Yeah,
something.
those things. But also you could, and since it's not only to read things, it's also to write things. So you can actually end up with a hacker trying to, forcing people to get married because they have filed for marriage in the digital service that the city provides, or change grades and things like that. So yeah, it's not something that you should just wait and see. And yeah,
So, do I get you correctly that basically it's some of the vulnerabilities are not in the school platform itself, but in
mm,
underlying platform that is utilized across many different services.
yeah,
So, okay, well that shit is scary. I
yeah,
mean,
it is scary.
and them using excuse like we don't have money to fix it.
Yeah.
Why didn't they grab the vendor by the balls and force the vendor to fix it? I mean, there is
They have
somebody who
made
is
the, they have made
responsible
the,
for it, no?
but they have made these decisions, and probably like 5 or 6 years back, or no, I don't know, maybe later, earlier on than that as well. I don't know. And knowing about these problems, and I have no idea why they chose this type of security principle, but the biggest, if you just describe it a little bit,
Hmm.
it's like they have selected single sign-on solutions,
Yeah.
and while doing that, they have exposed kind of everything to the same security risk. So even if you just want to go in and look at your kids.
Grades or
Uh,
maybe some
yeah, something like
attendance
that.
list or
You're also
something.
exposing the rest of the whole system in a way that probably aren't something they didn't have fantasy enough, I think, or knowledge about what could be done, and that's a little bit of a problem.
Okay, that yeah, that sounds scary. But let's move on. So basically, you pushed your code to GitHub. Some people join, helped you. I've seen you have over 700 commits on
Yeah.
GitHub, so you've been pretty active. Obviously, when they change something in API, that's another commit for you, right? To change the code a bit and release a new version.
Yeah.
So other people
I think
joined that. Yeah.
I think it's probably more than 700 commits. I think we have 3,000 people that have downloaded or cloned the repository, and I think it was 70 forks or something.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, I
So,
just checked the main repository, so maybe
aha, yeah,
it's just maybe in the master branch, the
sure,
700 commits, maybe
yeah,
that. Yeah, but I just noticed that it was really active. That's what
yeah,
I wanted to say.
yeah,
And so you created iPhone and Android application, right?
yeah.
And that's basically just a front end. It does nothing else but just make simple calls to the API, displays information in a way that doesn't hurt your eyes and doesn't want you to, smash your phone. And obviously the question is, obviously in the beginning it's hobby. You're just passionate. You want to do something. Like many hackers, good hackers. You just want to fix the problem. You don't want to just complain and be like, hey, this doesn't
Mm.
work. I don't like it. I have the tools and means to fix it. But what about, the future? I mean, you're not going to develop it, long term if you don't have some sort of support. I mean, you can run on passion until certain
Mm.
point, but
Sure.
what after that?
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's something we also decided early on that we can release the code open source,
Hmm.
but we decided to make it not free as a downloadable app on the App Store. So right now it costs 12 kroner, which is basically €1. And that the reason for that is that we want to be able to provide support and
Hmm.
also develop this further on, and continue working on it as a kind of a collaborative effort for anyone that wants to join.
Hmm.
And we have seen so many people that with different skills and expertise join the project. So now we have just released language support and from just having 3 or 4 languages that we could provide ourselves, like
Hmm.
someone in the development team, they were speaking French, so they translated that. But now we have Arabic, Somali, we have actually Latin. Someone on Twitter translated the whole thing to Latin, so that's interesting.
Wow.
So during one day, we actually got from 4 to 10 languages directly. So in many ways, I would say this is also an experiment on how you could also collaborate on these type of digital tools that we as users want, and see the power of open source to be applied on kind of government tech projects. So we don't know exactly how this is going to turn out, but we are open to all different ways of exploring this. But what we have decided is that we will not let this project die. So somehow, this is gonna continue living on. And when you think about it, which is something we have done quite a lot the recent weeks, especially during because of all the media attention.
Yeah.
Um, we realize that there are certain things that the government will not be able to do. Like if you want to ask Siri what the kids are having for lunch when you're making dinner or you're making plans, or like if you're in a hurry and want to know if they have sports during
Hmm.
some of the day. That's something you want to ask your personal assistant,
Hmm.
if it's Google Home or Siri and things like that. And if you imagine the city or the government to procure that type of innovation, maybe that's not what the procurement process is done, is suitable for.
Hmm.
So at some point, I think it's actually a good idea to kind of have some sort of make some sort of decision. What's the kind of the end of the government digital tools and infrastructure,
Hmm.
and where can the market fit in, and where can like open source also fit into the story. So I think what we're also seeing here, and a lot of the discussions regarding this project, is also about that. Like how can we make sure to kind of harvest this power that we are now showed is out there, and make that kind of into something that can actually solve some of the problems that we previously had with government procurement processes, and also less lack of efficiency, but also like who decides to be CIO of that type of project. Maybe we don't want to kind of to put all the innovation expectations on those people.
Hmm.
So if we can see open source as one of the tools that can utilize a new way of collaborating on digital infrastructure in a city and in a country, maybe we can find quite new ways of collaborating that way. But also, if you look at this from an international perspective, you can see like a lot of these projects everywhere in the world. Like we as parents have pretty basic needs in order for us to understand what's going on in school. So if anyone else wants to join this and try our code on a completely different city and different schools and things like that, we have actually provided kind of the separation between the app and the data. So we have something called embedded API.
Hmm.
So instead of having a proxy or an API on top of their API, we have pretty much made that into a separate component in our app,
Hmm.
which means that you can just provide a different component that sends the data to the app in the same format, which means that you can basically use this app and adapt it to completely different city. So if you want to in Helsinki you provide a different app, and then we can collaboratively create the app and make the front end interface better as a global society, and then maintaining just the kind of the embedded API, the local kind of adaptations to the local environment, which is that's exactly how internet was built, right? So
Yeah.
you started with small components and you put them together, and then evolving those separately and iterating on them. So who knows what's going to happen with this project later on, but I definitely am excited about the future.
Yeah, for sure. I noticed that you have an NPM package for
Yeah.
the embedded API. So basically, that it works like an adapter, and as long as you provide, you can adapt the data from another API. You could use the app without
Mm.
changing the app itself.
Yeah,
So that
exactly.
you made it so that it's easily adaptable to different APIs and so forth. So
Mm.
I think that is really cool that you actually put so much thought into it,
Yeah.
even though the idea was just to scratch your own itch, right? Just to make something better for yourself.
Yeah, and one really important point to make here is, of course, that I have not made this myself. This is a collaborative
Of
effort,
course.
and a lot of these questions that I'm not talking about right now is the brilliant mind behind this is Johan Öbrink,
Hmm.
and also Erik Hellman, and a lot of other really brilliant programmers as well, that have thought about these type of problems for a long time, and now we had a chance to kind of show how things could be done when you get the chance to do it without having anyone to screw it up.
Yeah, for sure. I looked at Finnish statistics, and I think Finnish Parliament actually put forth a recommendation on using open source, right?
Mm,
The idea behind it was that if, for example, a rich city like Helsinki
mm,
creates a platform, if that platform was open source,
mm,
then a much poorer city somewhere, in Lapland that doesn't have an IT budget of, 100 million euros
mm.
can utilize that system and enjoy all the benefits of
Yeah.
that big procurement project.
Mm,
Um, And we spend in Finland about, I think, 32 million euros in licenses. You know, we spend about 5 million in updates. So when we update software, we have to purchase something additional. And then direct procurement, that is the cancer of public procurement,
Yeah.
is about 18 million euros. So
Yeah.
basically, direct procurement means that, you know, somebody created a piece of shit, but it's
Yeah.
closed source. And now, if you want to do anything with it, you have to work with that company directly.
Yeah.
You have to procure services directly from that company because there is no other alternative.
Yeah. Yeah, I
And
know, and it's
it's cancer if you think about it, because
yeah.
but still, I think in 2009 Parliament, you know, put forth this recommendation, and yeah, it's still, you know, is not used widely. And we actually have a citizen initiative in Finland. Anybody can create a citizen initiative, and if it gets enough votes, you know, it will be considered a topic to be discussed in the parliament. So, and we have initiative in order to make open source a mandatory requirement for all procurement projects,
Yeah.
IT projects that are not considered, you know, like, you know, army secrets or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, as long as it's just something like a school platform, you know, you have to open source it. You have
Yeah.
to develop it on GitHub, and others have to be able to make use of it. They
Yeah.
have the license should be permissive so that it allows others to just copy it and use it for whatever they want, so that it breeds more innovation, so that it helps other cities and kind of contributes to the ecosystem, because it's our money. It's my, you know, tax money, and I want that to
Yeah.
better my country, to better the ecosystem, and so forth. But again, the initiative received maybe like 1,180 votes. So the problem that I see is that normal people that are not in IT field, they don't really care that much, right? They don't understand the underlying issue. But I think in order to drive the point home, if we remove all these licenses and direct procurement costs, we could have built a lot more schools. We could have maybe improved
Yeah,
the living standard in Finland.
yeah, I mean, you make a really good point here, and it's about education. Like, how can we make sure that everyone understands that there are really good alternatives that are much better and cheaper? Like, that seems a little bit too good to be true, but that's exactly what this is about. And we have similar situations here in Sweden. We have I just recently, last week, I checked how many procurement notes that were, or documents that were mentioning open source. Can you guess how many it was last year?
3. My guess is 3.
No, it's 1.
Okay, I was too optimistic.
Yeah, it's only 1. And of 20,000, so we have 20,000,
20,000.
and of course, you know, that those 20,000 is also about building schools and roads and things like that. But you know, we are spending, I think it was 2.6 billion euros in government IT.
Really?
And
Wow.
and of all of those, only 1 is using this, and my company actually won that. That's the only one. So
Okay.
my company wants to help. We want to we want to be part of this, and we want to help the government to kind of create this open source, both not only the software but also kind of a community around it, because just publishing source code is not going to change anything. But this is still really early on, but I hope that our project can actually be part of also educating the masses about the opportunities and the problem, and how this works, and that it's actually not that scary. You can actually doing this, but you have to you know, put pressure on the politicians. You have to understand these things. We can't really expect the people that are sitting there right now to understand these things, because we haven't voted the politicians and the people in the parliament and the government that understands these things, and that's why we're not, you know, seeing any change in this. So we have to, as a society, be much more active in also forcing kind of this discussion to be an active discussion. And so that's why, you know, I think it's really good for you also, and for us to have this conversation, because I think we can all help each other if we collaborate also internationally. And there are a lot of good initiatives in the EU. They have a lot of, you know, the rational argument is already there. You don't have to you don't have to spend more money on people understanding and researching if this is a good idea. It is already a good idea, and it's published so many papers on this topic. So it is only about starting. It's only about like daring to kind of question this really huge project that you are in the process of putting out as a big procurement, and stop doing that and see how can we divide this and start with a really small project instead, and then letting that small project be iterative, and then see how it goes. And I have actually one other thing to say about this this example that you do. If you have a really rich municipality that takes kind of the lead in this case, there's a big risk in that of doing that, because when you adapt the thing to the biggest and most complex city, you're probably building it too complicated. So it's a little bit of catch-22 here. It's actually much better to use the least complex city in the country, probably smallest country, and probably they don't have enough money to do this properly either. But if you could do kind of some sort of collaboration, and you could see, because it's much more probable that you can take the school system that was developed for a very small city, in the rural area, and then adapt that into an urban area where when you know that everything is secure, every user is happy, the one teacher in the school gets what she or he wants, and the parents in that school gets what they want. Like if you start there and then build and iterate on that, and then add complexity when you move on, then you actually get a much more efficient way of developing these things. So that's also kind of a policy perspective, and you should probably start doing much more of that. Like look at the rural cities and help them with budgets and also competence from the big cities, and make sure that they get what they want. And then we can use that as an experiment to then lower the risk, and then we can move into the cities instead. Yeah, and that's one of the ways that we are working in my company. We are doing a lot of those experiments in the rural areas, like with drone deliveries. We are testing now in the north, and we have one project where we use AI to optimize how transport is, all the transports in an area is being utilized, and collaborate between different vendors in transport. Things like that are really those things can't be done in the big cities, because it's too complex, and the vendors aren't interested in collaborating at all. But in rural areas you can. So that's an idea that we can also use a lot more, I think, when talking about this.
Yeah, I think basically constraints also breeds innovation, right? I mean, if you look at Estonia, right? Estonia is a very small country, and they don't have huge budgets for IT systems.
No.
And when compared, I think when they developed their patient information system, I think it was maybe like 100 times or even maybe 1,000 times cheaper than the one that we were developing in Finland.
Yeah.
And the Finnish version was just over the budget, missed all the deadlines, and in the end it was piss poor performance. From the usability perspective, from the performance perspective. I'm not sure about security. I haven't heard anything negative about security yet, but Estonians were able to develop something much quicker, because I think a lot of people just sat at the table and they were like, hey guys, we don't have a lot of money, so what we're gonna do, how are we gonna solve this problem in a smart way, obviously. So I do agree, I haven't thought about it, and you make a really good point that if you create certain constraints, then you have to be innovative. You have to start using open source, because in many cases you might not have the budget to start from scratch and reinvent the wheel. But a lot of companies that win those procurement projects, it's not in their interest to make it short and sweet. The idea is, because you win procurement in many cases by having a great portfolio and then setting a very low price, right? Because in procurement, it's about the cost in most cases. So maybe 60 points come from the cost, and then like 20 from the portfolio, and blah blah blah. And then the idea is they sell it very cheap,
Mm.
but they know the real money comes because the government doesn't know how to create good specifications.
Mm.
So they don't know how to create good specifications, and then every single thing that during the process they will see that they need, but they
Mm.
haven't mentioned in specification, will be
Mm.
made, separately and built separately.
Yeah.
And I think this is the biggest problem, because it's not in their interest to actually do a good job,
Mm.
because you don't make money that way.
No, but I think it's important to not point to any specific party in this and say that those are the bad guys, because that I don't think that's true. I don't think that the big vendors are want to do a bad job, and they probably have a lot of stories by themselves to talk
Mm-hmm.
about in all these projects as well. And I don't think that you can point everything of this on kind of the ones making the specifications and requirements. And I think in the end, I think this is a mindset problem. I think it's about we have made already the shift in from the
Mm-hmm.
industrial age over to kind of this world, whatever we want to call it now.
Yeah.
And especially during the last year, when we have forced everyone to work from home and find new ways of communicating and utilizing digitalization in a much better way, we have moved ourselves into this world that we are in right now. And in this world, all those ideas that comes from the industrial age, where you can just take if you can do something bigger, then this often better, because you get scaling, you get you can get much
Economy of
deeper
scale
and
and
things
so
like that.
forth. Yeah.
Those rules don't apply anymore. Because we are a much more complex world right now, and the expectations from the users change, the technology changes, and so we have to kind of bridge over to from a centralized idea where you centralize all the decisions, you
Mm-hmm.
centralize all the money, you centralize the power. In the industrial age, we are now seeing a shift over to something that is much more decentralized.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see this in finance with Bitcoin, that thrives in this environment that we are in right now, because you can really do innovations in finance based on that idea. And the same thing goes for all of these government tech, and open source is the perfect tool for doing that. Like, you can then decentralize all these decisions, and when you do that, the most important part of that process is that you're involving much more brain power.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when you try to from one person make one decision, when the final sign was done for this 12 years ago, this school project, they had no idea that we would get like all of these things should happen. Like Uber, we should have Zoom calls. We will have iPhones that are cheap as heck. Yeah, we should have watches on our phones. We will have Siri and all the AI tools that we have, and bandwidth and everything like that. They didn't know that, and the same thing goes now. Like, we don't know how the society will shift when we get self-driving cars or electrical planes, and all the stuff, that innovation that comes out from the sustainability and innovation with that. We have so much new things that's going to happen, so you can't really apply those tools or those ideas that it's better, the bigger it is, the better it is, because
Mm-hmm.
you have to utilize all the brain power that you have in the society in order for you to change the society while we're going. And that's a reality now, and you have to pretty much adapt to that. And that's going to be a huge shift for government processes and policymakers and lawmakers to keep up with the pace that the rest of society is actually moving in.
Yeah, I think one of the problems is that when they create specifications for procurement,
Mm.
um, they don't actually get input from a lot of people. I mean, there is maybe a steering group, or maybe there is a technical officer or somebody who is in charge of making sure that the technical requirements are there.
Yeah.
But they could actually, at some point, maybe they could even um, outsource that, in a sense that maybe it could be a wiki where everybody could comment, and technical people would be just browsing new procurement specifications and would be providing their 2 cents. Have you thought
Mm.
about this, and how about security, and so forth? And maybe there could be like a mandatory period where it should be visible and everybody could comment on it, and then after
Mm.
that it only proceeds to the procurement process. But I
Mm.
think it lacks a lot of visibility. Things kind
Mm.
of, even though, I mean, EU is pushing for open procurements, right? I mean,
Mm.
if you have large procurements, then all the EU states should be able to participate. I mean, companies from
Mm.
all the countries, but still, it's still kind of like in Finland, things are done under the table a bit. You know, many times they already know from whom they will be purchasing the
Mm.
service, and
Mm.
they're just like, oh yeah, this shitty EU, they are forcing us to put it on some portal. Okay, we're gonna put a few specifications there that
Mm.
nobody else can match, and
Mm.
we have our vendor. So a
Yeah.
lot of things, to be honest, are happening. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, but I mean, some of the officials consider procurement as a hassle, you know, the procurement
Mm.
process, even
Mm.
though I think it had good intentions, right?
Mm.
Done in the open, you know, open bids, people can compete, companies can compete, and so
Mm.
forth. But I think it just doesn't work. So my question to you, I guess, is how do we go about, what do you think, how we do go about fixing the procurement process, because it's needed process.
Yeah.
Governments need to purchase IT services, they need to purchase software. Obviously it's not, government is not the right, I think, is not built to innovate, right? I mean,
Mm.
it's very conservative and so forth. So you
Mm.
did mention that the innovation maybe could happen elsewhere,
Mm.
and the government could just create this solid foundation on top of which, like you guys did, you could
Mm.
then innovate.
Mm.
But I don't know how the procurement process works in Sweden. I would assume it's as shitty as ours.
Yeah.
So
It's the same EU law that
EU,
we.
EU
Yeah.
standard, but yeah, yeah, of course. But
Mm.
how do you go about changing this enormous process?
Yeah, I don't know. That's going to be interesting to see. I think that we need to start somewhere, and we need to start like where we are right now. And instead of trying to fix, kind of design the perfect system that
Hmm.
will fix this, we have to start realizing that this is a problem in the first place. So we are recognizing this as a problem, but also understanding that developing software is not about, it's not, we are not using the same processes anymore, that waterfall and those things. We are
Hmm.
using much more agile processes.
Hmm.
And the idea that we can just, if we just ask more people before we start, we're going to get what we need. That's not how it works. It's much more creative process than that. So if you see it more as if you as a city wants to procure an artist that's going to paint a wall, how do you do that? Would you procure that based on only on price, or would you look at something else that artists have done before? How can you maybe create some sort of relationship between different artists and getting them to collaborate, and then something might happen here and something else can happen here. Like you have to be much more flexible when looking at these things and just looking at it from a contract perspective. And obviously you should really make sure that we get a good foundation on the legal framework for doing that. And just this Tuesday we had a really good interesting discussion about how you could do, how can you make sure that we can have legal um, equivalents of the stuff that is going on in the open source world. Like, what is a pull request, for example? If you look at it from a legal standpoint, maybe
Yeah.
that could be seen as a vendor suggestion, or I don't know the English terms for these things. But
Hmm.
like, how can we look at this from a creative perspective, also, and not trying to change the process, how you work with the software development, but rather change the legal adaptation of that. So I don't have the answers to this, but first of all we need to understand the problem, and then we need to kind of start somewhere, and experiment somewhere, and that's probably going to happen. I think I'm positive with that. I think that we will start seeing new open source procured software that is done much more in the open, and where people can give their own suggestions, and then get paid, of course, for their suggestions
Of
as well.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, what you're saying is that we should adopt our existing legal framework in order to allow this innovation to happen. Because at this point, it's not very permissive.
No, but I think the praxis, the policy that we have developed on top of the framework or the EU law that we have, those things we might want to look at those praxis and policy and see how can we look at the legal framework and see what can we do without changing too much of the
Mhm.
process, the development process that actually works. So yeah, but I'm not a legal expert, so I can't
Of
really
course, of course, of course.
understand those things. But I think that we need to be looking at these things quite uh, extensively now, I think.
So if we go back to your project, so how long has it been out in the wild, and how long have people been using it, and what's been the reaction when it comes to parents? Do they like it, and what are your plans for the future?
Yeah.
What will happen next, and how can people help?
Yeah. Good question. So when we released it, the directly came out to be on first place on App Store. So that was
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was super fantastic, and we got fantastic reviews. And also, we had worked on this, for 2 months or a
Hmm.
little less than that, and we were really nervous because, in some ways, it was just an app showing kind of very basic stuff. It was
Hmm.
really really basic. It wasn't
Hmm.
something you would, we have then done AI things that are super interesting, like those things that we can really be proud of. This was just an app showing kind of newsletters from the teachers and the schedule. Like that's so basic, and
Yeah.
we were so afraid that people were just gonna say, what is this crap? This is just a basic stuff, but people loved it. So
Hmm.
they got us, 4.6, I think it was 4.7 in average review on both App Store and Google Play
Wow.
Store. And obviously, once the city started to sabotaging us, that average grade was getting a little bit less. But I think now it's about 4.1 or 4.2, something like that. Uh,
Yeah.
but the plans are to kind of just continue working like this, that we and adding more features securely and consciously, and helping, first of all, helping parents with their
Hmm.
communication. But we also hope that we can start talking with teachers. There are a lot of programming teachers out there that might want to add features that would benefit them, like when they take notes about if the students have a ride to the classroom, those kind of things that they do all the time. Maybe some of those things are interesting to start developing, and maybe and another thing that we are also looking into is to develop this for more cities. We have already started
Hmm.
talking to I think it's 3 or 4 new cities in Sweden that are interested and that have similar problems with their platforms.
Okay.
Um, and iteratively just continue working. And that's also important for me to say that I'm not leading this in any way. This is a really really interesting project to watch, because every day there's someone that has a new idea, that they have developed something new, and we just go with that. So anyone wants to join us, just look at our GitHub page,
Hmm.
see the issues there, and if you are interested to involve yourself, just try to download the code and see if it works. And if you are interested in engaging more, we also have a Discord where you can join. um, and if you're interested in also kind of helping out with UX and communication and PR stuff and things like that, we are open to all contributions here.
What
And
about money
it's really fun.
contributions?
Yeah,
What
it's a
about
lot.
money?
Yeah, exactly. We have a Patreon, so we're really
Hmm.
happy with that. Last week we actually changed business model, if you can say that, for hobby
Okay.
projects. But so instead of charging money for the app itself, we are now open for donations on Patreon instead. So now
Hmm.
the app is free for everyone to
Hmm.
download. So I encourage everyone to do that. So that's going to help us a lot. Especially, of course, if you have children in Stockholm. So,
Of course.
but everywhere else as well. And if you are in the city and listen to this and want to do the same thing in your city, I encourage you to do it. It's really fun. It's something that I really really gets you to understand how the society works and how it's
Mm-hmm.
not working. And it's a good way of illustrating open source as a way of procurement process, like challenge the status quo with something that you can actually take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And it's not rocket science, if we in the end, if we would get sued or get police put in jail just because we have showed information that we already have access to about when the kids start school, I think then we have a major issue in our society if that's something that is illegal to do.
Yeah, I hope it doesn't doesn't end up end up in that situation. But you mentioned that it's really fun, and then I thought in my head, I'm like, yeah, getting police involved is really fun, and fighting with the officials. But yeah, of course, it's fun from the learning perspective, right? You learn
Yeah,
a lot during the process.
yeah,
I also noticed on your Patreon you have a opportunity, like there are different tiers, right?
yeah.
Like starting from like €1 or something like that, but
Mm.
then it goes to like I think like 10 million or something, no?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what's up with that?
No,
What?
yeah, it's a fun statement. Like we say in that, if you're that if you have that much money and you want to support us with 1 million a month, it is,
Yeah, I think it was
then
1
then
million,
you
yeah.
will then will you will have paid as much as the city of Stockholm has paid for their original platform in 10 years. Uh,
Wow.
so I think we'd done that both because it's a little we always want to use humor in our communication, but also we want to kind of also point out the absurdity in the money involved here. Like if you would think that it's ridiculous to pay for someone 1 million a month to develop these things.
Hmm.
You also have to put in your head that's exactly the amount of money that we have already paid, a different development team to start building this 10 years ago.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah,
Hard to even fathom how
yeah,
big of a number it is if you think how, I mean, I'm sure there is other things that Stockholm could be spending that money on, right? I mean,
yeah,
education and
exactly.
living standards, schools, improving roads, communication, and so forth. For
Yeah.
sure. Good, good, good. And could you talk a little bit about the technology stack that you are using? Because maybe some of the listeners are more maybe
Hmm?
technically inclined.
Sure.
So you mentioned that you're obviously welcoming new patches, pull requests and so forth.
Yeah.
So what are you working with?
So the stack is basically the JavaScript stack
Mm-hmm.
or TypeScript stack, you
Mm-hmm.
would say. We are using React Native
Mm-hmm.
as the platform for developing the apps. And previously, we were also having ideas on developing our own APIs to do
Mm-hmm.
that. And while doing that, we were using Kubernetes and Express and Node. Right now, we aren't using that at all. But if you are interested in doing that, if you're listening to this and
Mm-hmm.
are kind of on the inside of a city and you want to provide an API to your internals, then you would definitely look at kind of those part of the story as well as the stack, that because we have already developed a lot of things that you need to do if you are in the city to be kind of open to this type of tools or apps as well. And then we are using Next.js for the site
Mm-hmm.
with Vercel. Those guys are great.
Yeah,
They
Vercel is
developed,
great.
and yeah, so when you're working in the open source and these type of projects and you want to develop something, you want to be having a preview of a pull request, for example, then
Mm-hmm.
Vercel is providing for each pull request, they are providing a preview link, so you can start seeing before you're approving the pull request, you can actually see exactly in your web browser how that code will look like before you merge it. So that's really great. What else do we have? I would encourage everyone to also look at Discord for
Mm-hmm.
collaboration. That has been a huge success for us as a communication tool for all text and also voice and sharing screens and things like that. Instead of using Slack, which most of us use at work, Discord was perfect. My kids use Discord all the time, so I thought, why don't we use that in this case as well? Um, I don't know what else we are using. We have just recently started using a really cool translation tool
Hmm.
for collaborating between translators, because it's not only of problem where you start translating your app, but then the biggest problem occurs when you have new needs. You want to add a new button somewhere, and you
Yeah,
don't
new
have that.
strings and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't remember the name of it right now, but if you're interested in that, those guys were also super cool. They let us use their tools for free,
Hmm.
which is super awesome. So we should link that company in the description here.
For sure, for sure.
They help us a lot with of all of that things, like keeping track on the different languages, and also if handling the kind of all the submissions, and they also have tools for kind of those things. Yeah, that's about it. And it's a simple app. It's just an app,
Yeah.
React Native. It's using we have developed the embedded API that Johan Brink created. That's provided as hook functions, which means that the rest of the app only can, whenever you want to show a schedule, just you use schedule, and then you get the data. If it's cached, then you just fetch it directly.
Yeah, so
Um,
you do cache it, right? So that the
yeah,
performance
yeah.
is better, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we cache everything. The idea that you have new children every time you log in, that's
Mm-hmm.
weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we cache your children, and obviously if you have a new kid that day, then we will that data will in the background be fetched again. So yeah, the
But
app
you only
is
cache it on the device itself, so
yeah,
it's
yeah, of
it's
course.
yours and only on your device. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Good,
and
but
and and that's exactly how you would, if you read the GDPR,
mhm,
they say, if you don't need to store data elsewhere, then you shouldn't. Like, that's
mhm.
privacy by default and security by default, and that's exactly the principles that we have been utilizing.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I'm gonna have all the links in the description: GitHub, link to the Patreon, link to the website, link to the original story on Hacker News, just so that people who are more inclined to see the technical details on how you're doing regexp and trying to catch changes in the API,
Yeah.
they can see all that. But this was really, really fun, Christian. I wish you all the best. I think it's an amazing project. It's you've done a really good job in very short time, and even though you say that it's very simple, and there is no AI, there is nothing fancy there, but there is a need for it. There is a
Mm,
real need for it, and people appreciate the work that you've done. So
mm.
hopefully this podcast in some way will help spread this message and maybe get you more contributors, maybe more PR, so that you can do more of this, and maybe you can go to other cities as you mentioned, or at
Yeah,
some point. Yeah.
it's one really important
Hmm.
issue that I want to just clarify
Of
is
course.
that this is not our project. This is not me project. This
Yeah.
is our project. So if someone in Helsinki is listening to this and
Hmm.
want to be looking at this from their perspective, and they are super, we would be super happy to help them to release their own app in Helsinki. That's not, we have released everything we have done in the very open license, Apache 2.
Yeah.
Um, so if you want to release this wherever you are as your own app in your own market and get money for that, then that's super fine. We will help you as much as we can. So please do that, and not only helping us, but we can help you. So I really hope this can be, much larger than what it already is.
Yeah, for sure.
And
So it
also,
can.
I
Yeah.
forgot to mention one thing,
Yeah.
more tool
Yeah.
that we are using, React Native, React Kitten, UI Kitten.
Yeah, yeah, I
That's
saw that. I saw that
UI, and
first time I saw it, and I was like, "What?" And it looked pretty cool.
yeah, it's super cool. That's so much fun. If you want to just, start learning how to create an app, start with UI Kitten. They have so many new things that you can just add lists and navigation and buttons and everything, and it looks good directly.
Yeah, I saw that like the motto is like from MVP to production or to something like that, is that they make it easy, but it's also production ready in a sense that it looks
It
good
is.
and
Yeah.
functions well. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I first time I heard about the framework or the library is from you
Mm.
guys. I
Aha,
went
cool.
and checked it out. Yeah, I went and
Yeah.
checked it out. Obviously, I looked at your GitHub source and just wanted
Yeah.
to familiarize myself with the
Yeah.
project, and I noticed that, and I was really impressed.
Mm.
Really impressed with the
Yeah.
library. Okay, good. So I'll have everything in the description down
Yep.
below. Christian, it's been a pleasure.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very
Thank you for having
much.
me.
It's been really fun, and I wish you all the best. I will have Christian's LinkedIn profile as well. So if somebody wants to get involved and ask maybe a few additional questions in private, they'll be able to reach you maybe on LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
Or
LinkedIn or Twitter
yeah.
or on GitHub or on email or anything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, there are many ways of
Yeah.
reaching out nowadays, for
Sure.
sure.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Christian. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you
Take
so
care.
much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.